Okay, here we are at the bunker shot chapter. We're going to talk about the greenside bunker first. Greenside bunkers and fairway bunkers are two totally different golf shots. In the greenside bunker, you don't actually touch the golf ball with the golf club, but the sand that you strike pushes the golf ball out. In a fairway bunker, you're going to strike simply the golf ball first and maybe a little bit of sand after impact, but certainly not before. So the two shots are quite different in the actual way that you strike the sand, but the technique itself is relatively similar as is any other golf shot that you may hit. First thing we want to understand a little about the bunker or the golf club for a sand wedge is that the sand wedge has what's called a bit of bounce in it, where the trailing edge of the golf club is lower than the leading edge of the golf club. In a typical club, when you get from a pitching wedge on into your irons, it's relatively straight across. So you can just hold your club up like so and notice that when the shaft is relatively vertical, that the trailing edge is lower than the leading edge. This allows the golf club to skip through the sand rather than dig into the sand. You can relate this to driving down the highway with in your car and maybe putting your hand out to the side. And when you put it out to the side, it'll cut through the air if you hold it level. If you tip it down, it will go down into the and dive. But if you put the leading edge of the club or your hand up and the trailing edge down, it actually pushes it up. So it's the same thing, the concept that the bottom of the sand wedge is for. So the leading edge is up, the trailing edge is down, and that helps you skip the club through the sand. The one thing we don't want to do is go trying to gouge in and dig the golf ball out of the bunker. So we want to make sure that you use that bounce and use the back of the golf club. And we'll kind of go over how that's done here in just a second. First thing we want to do is get set up properly. And that is that we're going to have a relatively normal setup, but a little bit wider base. And then we're going to get our feet nice and dug into the sand so we don't slip. And you're allowed to do this by the rules. So when you're doing that, kind of take a feeling for how much sand is in the bunker. It may be a little crusty, it may be a little thin, but you'll get a feel for how much sand is in the bunker, and that's going to ultimately impact how you want to play the shot. So the more sand that you have in the bunker, so if you go in and you've got a lot of wiggle room underneath your feet, you're going to play a little bit further behind the ball that you strike the ground. If it's a little firmer, then you might catch the sand just a little bit closer to the ball. This is relatively close. It's not a tremendous difference in that, but we don't want to get too technical in where you're striking. But usually it's anywhere from, say, 1 inch to 2 inches behind the ball. But the tighter the sand, a little closer to the ball, the fluffier the sand a little bit further back. And you can get a feel for that when you dig your feet into the ground. So when you dig your feet into the sand, we want to get a nice stable position. We're going to put the ball position just slightly to the left of your feet, just slightly left of center. Get our feet in. And I like to see you take a grip a little further down in the grip and point the grip of the golf club at your center. This allows us to use the bounce of the golf club that we talked about without opening the face. I like to see the face stay nice and square to the target. Point the club at your center so that we can keep the golf club moving a little more outside our hands instead of getting back behind us. But point it in your center so we can use the back of the golf club and keep the face square to the target line. Be nice and flexed in your knees. When we swing back, we're going to be very stable in our lower body. We don't want to be moving around too much. You're just going to turn your shoulders and let your lower body react. So we get set, we get in here nice and stable. We're going to turn back, let our wrists naturally set up. We don't want to do any early cocking. Don't want to have any late stuff. Just let it naturally set. Like in any chip shot, the more wrist set you have, the more work you got to do to get it back square. So just let it naturally work and not overdo the wrist cock. We do want some, but just make it natural. So we've gripped down, we got our feet in a little bit wider, our shaft's pointing at our center, and then we're going to swing back and through, not taking a tremendous amount of sand, but nice little skip through the sand. And if you heard the word that I used, which was through, that's probably the most important word that you could have in a bunker shot, especially a greenside bunker shot, is that we're going through the sand. Not down at the ball, not up at the ball, but through the sand. So keep that in mind when you're playing, that you'll notice when I just swung through, my backside moved through just as well, just like in any other shot. So I turned back and I pushed my hip through and pushed my weight to the front and let my arms come along for the ride and do the work. Let the club do the work. So we got set in, we got a little wider, center, shafts at the center, back. Then we're gonna drive through to the left, skipping through. Now as you go through, you wanna hold the face of the club a little bit more open. It's not like a normal club shot where we're trying to get a lot of release and speed, but we wanna just kind of hold the face open so we can use the back of the golf club and get a little bit more loft on it as it goes through the sand, so it skips through. So once again, when it gets set, feet in, grip at the center, swing back, move through. You can see my backside's all the way through. Not an overly hard swing, not gouging into the sand, just a nice standard bunker shot. Now a good way to practice this and get a feel for where you're actually striking the sand. Most people tend to strike a little behind because they're trying to help the ball up rather than trying to go through and let the club do the work. But you can draw your two lines about 6 inches apart there. Put your little dot in the middle, here, here, on down. And pretend like they're golf balls, and let's make a few swings and see where we strike. So we're gonna go back, through. And that was actually pretty good. I hit it right on the front of that and came out on the end over here. Now I'm gonna exaggerate that one time and do what you typically see. Let's help the ball up. And you'll see that I struck way back here to the right because my weight was back and I was hanging back to the right. So I hit up and I would have sculled that ball or hit it fat if I was a little closer. So I'd say, okay, well let's make sure you get your weight moving through this ball. And then we got it back up to the correct spot. Once you get to where you can hit the front line and come out on the back line, take a ball and put it down where one of those spots is. Get back into your setup, feet are down nice and in the ground, a little wider. Shafts at the middle again. Gonna make a nice natural turn back, very little weight going in the backswing, you'll see. And then move through. There's a little sand in the face. All the way up through to the forward leg. You see the back legs going through. So back and through the sand. Now that's our greenside bunker shot. The sand bunker shot that we're going to use for the fairway is going to be a little bit different. We'll talk about that in a minute. Hope you've enjoyed this little tip and hope it helps you understand the chapter for greenside bunkers a little more clearly. Thank you for reading the book and appreciate you watching this video. Have a great day.